When you're actually facing the golden throne of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, behind you is this beautiful image of the native lady of Amritsar. Now, the interesting thing for me here is the size, the sheer size of this painting. It's nearly 6 foot in size, and that's me standing there. And it's really, and still, I think you can't see how big this painting really is from the angle of this photo. It's 1.83 meters in size, so also so almost life size, and it really is a magnificent piece. And it can be easily overlooked when you visit the the Sikh Kingdoms Gallery. So Sonia ji, I'm just going to ask you now, I'm going to hand over to you to take us through this painting, and I will
have the next slide.
Of course. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Ranveer. So looking at this marvelous painting, I'm first struck by the Mona Lisa look that the lady has on her face. And as I peer closely, I see a beautiful young woman wearing an array of jewels in dazzling gold, silver, diamonds, emeralds, and other gemstones. Sadly, we don't know whose portrait this is. We don't know what is the name of this lady. And even the name of the artist is not confirmed. But what we do know is that this painting was commissioned by the city of Amritsar to be shown in the Colonial and Indian exhibition in London in 1886 and was then bought by the museum. And the painting was commissioned to be a kind of a documentary record of the jewelry and the costumes of the region of Punjab in the 19th century. And what I'd like to do is to invite you all to closely examine this painting with me while I share with you the Punjabi names of the different pieces of jewelry that she's wearing, because that gives us an idea of the richness and the diversity of India's artisans and craftsmen. So let's start at the top. And if we look on her forehead is an elegant tikka, and above which she wears this big elaborate ornament, which is called the matha patti. And on her nose is this huge nut, or the nose ring, which is practically covering the full impact of her face. And her ears are also covered with these large earrings called dandi chunki, and above which are the sagi full and jhumar in her hair. And on her neck, she wears 2-3 different types of necklaces. And around her left arm, she has an ornament called the baju band. And now as we move and look at her hands, we see gold chains, which are kind of attached to her fingers and the wrist. And this is called an RC. And on her fingers is a selection of rings, including a mirror ring, which was a very convenient way for the lady to check her vanity at all times. And on her wrists is an armful of gold and kundal bangles and bracelets. Now, since this painting was commissioned as a documentary record of the jewelry and the costumes of the region, that is very evident from the pose of the lady who's been painted, which you see in the full-scape painting on the right-hand side, and which she's shown holding up her skirt so as to make visible the jewelry that she's wearing on her feet as well. And so when we look at her feet, we notice that what the jewelry here is also as elaborate and exquisite as the other pieces, but these pieces are not made in gold. They are of silver. And this is because of the traditional sanctity that was accorded to gold, and it was not considered appropriate to wear it on your feet. So I would invite you to take a moment to just take in all of this painting. And as we look at it, we also see that apart from her jewelry, her clothes are also equally stunning. In fact, she's actually wearing 2 sets of clothes. So there's one layer underneath, and over which there's another complete whole set, which consists of two large head and body coverings. There's the tunic, a full skirt, and pajamas. On the outside is her embroidered transparent shawl, underneath which is another green dupatta and a red colored tunic or a kameez that is edged with a white band in gold thread work called zari. She holds up her full blue skirt, or kagra as it is called, under which we catch a glimpse of the red churidar pajamas that she's wearing. Her slippers are also embroidered with metal thread, and they are in front of her. So while I'm just find this an exquisite piece of art, and I'm going gaga over this magnificent portrait, Rav, I recalled you say that most of the people in your tour group don't find this to be of much interest to them. And I find this observation to be very interesting. Why do you think people don't give it the attention you think they should?
Yeah, I think many of the tour groups are usually visiting the museum for the first time, or they haven't been for many years. And so really for them, the tour is all about the most exquisite, expensive items on display, which I mean by gold. So the golden throne captures everyone's attention. They move on to maybe the turbans, and a few people maybe take a look at the musical instruments unless guided to. And this is actually behind you, this painting. So this painting is watching you watch everything else. That's the way I see it. And I look at people, and even when they walk past this painting, they don't read the card. And the way Amritsar is spelt with a U, they don't even connect that to the golden city of Amritsar for the Sikhs. So I watch all this and I think amazing. And then at the end of the tour of that section, I bring them to this painting and I said, no one noticed this one, but look at her, look at this, look at the jewelry. And they have the actual jewelry items to the left and right, many exquisite items, and you can spend a long time looking at this. But one is the positioning. Two is the fact that they don't associate a name to this painting, because as you said, this is called the Lady of Amritsar. That may be a factor. If it had a glorious title that people were aware of, then they would look for this item, because it's always, the throne is always described as Ranjit Singh's kursi, the Lahore kingdom's, a chair. So then that they go looking for that, and that's where the attention is.
Yeah, this is what you're saying is very interesting. And I've been thinking about it since you mentioned it to me during our conversations, and what you just said about her not having a name. So I was thinking, is it that this is we give it a thought to what we consider worthy of claiming proudly as our heritage, and what we ignore and why. So while we had taken the sheer beauty of the painting itself, of this portrait, and let us imagine for a moment that this was a portrait of some Maharani or a princess or a Rani, and it had a name to it, then how would we react to it? Compared to what we know now, that we don't know who this is, and it's probably a painting of an unknown courtesan. So does that impact what we proudly claim as our heritage and what we ignore because it does not fit into today's popular narrative? So this is just something I think we can all think about. And the second thought also that came to my mind was that we don't have, sadly, very many visual references of women from 19th century Punjab. So the clothes that she's wearing do not fit into what we associate with clothes for Sikh women. Today that when we think of Sikh women from that period, that is not the visual memory we have, just because we don't have so many references. But I know for a fact that this is true, that these were clothes that were worn by Sikhs, because I've seen these kagras or these skirts. My grandmother owned a number of them, and she told us stories about it, that whenever she was to leave the household for whatever reason, she was living in a village, So while she was wearing a salwar kameez and dupatta inside the home, but when she stepped out, she would quickly just wear a kagra over her clothes and then drape this big chadar around her face and cover the upper part of her body. So in a manner which is quite like this lady. So these are just some things that I think to do with what a cultural visual training is. So I'm glad you brought this, you selected this painting to talk about today.